Hello, I'm Ros Atkins here in Washington. Thank you very much indeed for joining me on BBC News. We're continuing our coverage of the announcement of Iran's new Supreme Leader. A few hours ago, we found out who that will be. Ruling clerics in Iran have chosen Mujtaba Khamenei to replace his late father, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. He was killed on the first day of the war. The news of Mujtaba Khamenei's appointment was made on Iranian state TV, and already Iran's Revolutionary Guards have declared their allegiance to the new leader. Well, this is unlikely to be welcomed by the US and Israel. President Trump had already labelled Mujtaba Khamenei an unacceptable choice. Israel's also already made clear it'll target any successor if the regime continues as before. Well, our chief international correspondent, Lise Doucette, has been monitoring the announcement. We'll speak to her in a moment. First of all, here's this report.
Hell on earth. That's how someone living in this dark described it. Tehran was on fire last night, the Sharon oil depot in flames. One of 30 Israel said it bombed across Iran. The biggest attack in this war on the country's oil facilities, the lifeblood of its economy. Fire tore through the streets toward shops and homes, into ancient water channels. They're meant to irrigate the trees, cool the city, not burn it. Hassan had been heading to the depot at dusk when the first missile struck.
I turned the truck around on the street so it would be away from the danger. But then when they fired the first missile, two more struck right afterwards. The first one struck right over there. Then the gasoline started flowing towards the residential areas.
Today, Tehran was shrouded in toxic smoke. When the rain came, it was black too. Some residents spoke of their suffering in messages sent to the BBC's Persian service.
They've blown it up. Oil depot, Hisar and Baghestan areas. It was as if the night has suddenly turned into day.
The city is really covered in smoke. You can smell the burning. I can't see the sun. There is a horrible smoke. It's still there. I'm very tired. I've been indoors the whole time.
The port city of Bushehr in the south was also targeted. These satellite images show the impact at its naval base, including a capsized vessel at its jetty. The airbase was hit too. This is what it looks like now. Iran is still hitting back. Fragments of an intercepted missile struck this home in Tel Aviv. The emergency services say 8 people were injured today in waves of missile barrages. Some managed to get through Israel's prized air defenses. But Israel and the US say their campaign is succeeding faster than expected.
What we are aiming for is very clear objectives. One, Iran cannot have nuclear capability, and they were rushing again to that capability. Number two, their long-range missiles. It's also a golden opportunity for the people of Iran to rise up and bring change. We leave it up to them.
And now, there's a new target. Tonight, State TV made the long-awaited announcement. Mujtaba Khamenei is Iran's new supreme leader. He assumes his father's mantle. In his mold, a hardliner, close to the powerful Islamic Revolutionary Guards. The man President Trump didn't want, the leader Israel says is in their sights. The commander-in-chief in charge of Iran's existential battle.
Well, we can talk to Lise Doucette live, our chief international correspondent. Lise, give us further reaction, please, to this announcement.
Well, as you just heard in that report, are waiting to see what President Trump will have to say. He repeatedly made it clear that he wanted to be involved in the choice. That was unthinkable. But he also made it clear who he didn't want, and that was Mujtaba Khamenei. He said he was someone who wouldn't bring, in his words, peace and harmony to Iran. As you know, Roz, President Trump was looking for as he would put it, a Delcy Rodriguez, in other words, the person who stepped in Venezuela after Nicolas Maduro, the president, was extracted without any American casualties, without any chaos. But Iran is not Venezuela, and the choice of Khamenei underlines that Iran now, especially with the hardline Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, being really the real power behind this throne in Iran, are calling the shots now, and they have very close links with Mujtaba Khamenei. There will be disappointment, deep disappointment among Iranians, those who had taken to the streets in January in large numbers across the country, who had called Mujtaba's father a dictator, who called for the end of the Islamic Republic, that rule. But they will also hope that, even though this is a sign of continuity and connection to hardline forces, they will hope that his son's days are numbered, and Israel has made it absolutely clear that they are now going to hunt him down.
And what do we know of his relations with other countries in the region? Clearly, at the moment, Iran is attacking a number of them, but do we know if he has relations which may see him choose a different course to what has played out in the last 9 days?
He's said to be in the mold of his father. He's said to be close to Ari Larijani, who is the man who effectively is running Iran, had been put in power as in the run-up to war by Ayatollah Khamenei. He's head of the National Security Council and very close to Russia. But the rest of the world doesn't know much about Mujtaba Khamenei, and Iranians don't know much about Mujtaba Khamenei. In fact, some people tonight were saying that no one's even heard his voice. He has been in the shadows for decades, working in his father's office. His name was first mentioned really in public and in a controversial way was in 2005, where he was accused by reformist politicians of engineering election rigging to bring Mahmoud Ahmadinejad to power. And Mehdi Karoubi, one of the politicians, has accused him of being the master's son in reference to his father. And the rebuke was, no, he is a master on his own. So he very much is familiar to the deep state of Iran, and I think the world will start finding out about him. But he's very, very much in his father's mold.
Lise, thank you very much indeed. There's Lise Doucet, our chief international correspondent, live with us from the BBC newsroom in London. Well, as Lise was saying, President Trump has previously said he wanted to be involved in picking Iran's new leader, and he gave his thoughts on Mujtaba Khamenei on Thursday, telling the US news outlet Axios they are wasting their time. Khamenei's son is a lightweight. I have to be involved in the appointment. Khamenei's son is unacceptable to me. Well, we wait to see how Donald Trump will respond now that this appointment has happened. Our North America editor, Sarah Smith, has also been following the story from Washington.
We had already heard from Donald Trump that the Ayatollah's son was an unacceptable choice. He dismissed him as a lightweight. And he has already said that anyone who hasn't been approved by him, who was chosen to lead Iran, wouldn't last for very long. So we haven't heard from him directly yet since the announcement was made, but he's made his views very clear about this. And that just feeds into the confusion that there is about exactly what it is the US is trying to achieve in Iran, because we hear from them variously that they want to stop Iran's nuclear program and stop it developing nuclear weapons and destroy its conventional weapons. But then we also hear Donald Trump talking about regime change, demanding unconditional surrender from the Iranian regime, while at the same time he put out a post on Truth Social this weekend criticising Sir Keir Starmer for being too late in joining a war he said had already been won. And now we learned today he's even contemplating putting US troops into Iran, putting American boots on the ground to try to grab and destroy the stockpiles of rich uranium that there are in that country. So you can see that there's a real contrast between the tactical military successes the regime is able to boast about and the lack of any clear strategy as to what those strikes actually want to achieve in Iran.
Well, there's Sarah Smith with us from the White House. Well, not long after Iran confirmed its new Supreme Leader, I spoke with the top Democrat on the House Armed Services Committee, Congressman Adam Smith, and got his reaction.
Well, I think it underscores the difficulty of making substantial changes in the Iranian regime. And that seems to be one of the central goals of President Trump in this war, is to get a leadership in Iran that is more amenable to U.S. interests. And the selection of the late Ayatollah's son sort of, I think, underscores how hard it's going to be to get to that more friendly Iranian regime.
And Donald Trump's already indicated in the last few days that this selection would be unacceptable. There has to be a possibility that either America or Israel now targets the new Supreme Leader. Would you support that?
No, I don't think we should make it our business to assassinate the leader of countries that we do not like. Now, his father was a different case. His father had clearly threatened U.S. interests. We were in a conflict. I mean, I don't support the war, but I can at least have some understanding of wanting to target him. But if we simply say, no matter who's leading Iran, we're going to keep trying to kill them, I think that sets a very dangerous precedent for how countries are going to interact across the globe, none of which, gets into the issue of how do we deal with the threat that Iran poses. But I don't think it should be the United States foreign policy position that, if there's a leader of a country we don't like, we're going to go try and kill them. I am worried about how the precedent that sets.
You referenced that you're against this war. Does this selection and the fact that clearly the Iranian regime is not minded to change course cause you to reassess that position?
No. Look, Iran is a very, very difficult challenge without question. But the idea that because it's a difficult question that we should go to war and start dropping bombs and that's necessarily the solution, I think is a mistake. And look, these are lessons we should have learned. And I've been in Congress for all of this, for Iraq, for Afghanistan, for Libya, for Syria, a bunch of different things that we've thought about and looked at. The military is not the easy button that the president seems to think it is to solve the problem. And we've already seen this war spread. I think it's around 14 countries have been dragged into it in one way or another. Massive disruption to the global oil supply, massive disruption to the entire economy of the Middle East, which impacts the economy of the world. And Iran is still there and still posing many of the same problems that they posed before. So I think relying on the military to this extent is a mistake. And again, it's a lesson we should have learned over the course of the last 30 years, a lesson that President Trump on the campaign trail, when he was running for office, said he had learned. He said he wouldn't get us into a war with Iran specifically. And here we are. I think he should have heeded his own advice.
Now, I wonder, in your capacity as a ranking member of the Armed Services Committee, you will clearly be privy to information that most of us aren't. Have you been shown any evidence that there was an imminent threat from Iran? The president has repeatedly referenced this.
No, I don't think there's any debate that there was not an imminent threat in any meaningful sense of that word. Iran was not getting ready to attack the United States. They were not. They were reconstituting their ballistic missile capacity. That, I think, was pretty clear. What we have not yet been shown in Congress is evidence of where their nuclear program was at. And President Trump has relied on that quite a bit in his rhetoric since the war started. At one point, President Trump said that Iran, if we hadn't done this, Iran would have had a nuclear weapon by now and would have used it by now, which doesn't comport with any intelligence I've ever seen. So we don't know about the nuclear aspect of it, but there was no imminent threat to the U.S. Iran was not preparing to attack the U.S.
But you do presumably accept that Iran has huge influence across the region, that it's perceived as a menace by many in the region, and that Israel repeatedly highlights the fact that Iran doesn't even accept the existence of that country. If you don't want to go about it this way, how would you go about addressing those very real and surely reasonable concerns?
Yeah, well, I think what we've done, we've had a very, very aggressive sanctions regime put in place. I think after the October 7th attack on Israel, as they certainly should have to protect themselves, responded to that by going after Iranian proxies aggressively in Hamas, obviously, but Hezbollah, and also President Assad in Syria when he was still there, substantially weakened Iranian proxies. And then Israel attacked Iran itself directly in the 12-day war. So we have sanctions. We have that response from Israel that has really contained the threat, not eliminated it. I understand that. And look, If I could wave a magic wand and make the threat from Iran go away, very happy to do that. But war is not always the answer. And here it is coming at an enormous cost, and no one has yet shown me the path between that cost and the elimination of the threat from Iran that we want. If we're just trying to degrade them, well, we are degrading them at an enormous expense. But if we want to remove the regime, that's an entirely different thing to which we do not seem to have a plan to accomplish. So we're fighting this war to degrade Iran a little bit more than they were degraded before it started. And we don't have any guarantee that they're not going to go right back to building their ballistic missile program once we're done.
That's Congressman Adam Smith speaking to me a little while ago. Now, on Sunday, crude oil prices jumped above $100 a barrel. These figures are coming as Asian trading opens up. Major energy producers in the Middle East have cut production due to the impact of the war. Brent crude, which is the global benchmark, was 18% higher. And we should mention the Strait of Hormuz. We've talked about it a lot in recent days. It's a crucial waterway for the transport of oil exports. It effectively remains closed due to the war. And in Iraq, the oil industry and sources there have reported that production from its main southern oil fields have fallen by 70% to 1.3 million barrels per day. Well, a little while ago, President Trump posted on social media on these rising oil prices. He says short-term oil prices, which will drop rapidly when the destruction of the Iran nuclear threat is over, is a very small price to pay for the USA and the world, safety and peace. Then he goes for capitals. Only fools would think differently. Well, my BBC News colleague Kashmir Madera has been speaking with our economics editor Faisal Islam, who's been describing this record-breaking increase in the price of oil.
Yeah, no criticism intended here, but jump doesn't quite capture what we've just had at the opening of Asian trade in oil. It absolutely spiraled the oil price at the opening. Yes, it jumped above 100, and then I was just watching my screen, my terminal, and every time I looked up, it had gone up another $1. It went up 22% in about 20 minutes. And actually, as soon as I'd filed that it was above $100, it was above $110, $111 it got to at the peak. I think it settled down at about 106. You know, some will argue this is early Asian trade, it's thin trading, but I think what it reflects, exactly as you said, is this combination of two events. Yes, the effective shutting of the Straits of Hormuz, not formally, but de facto it is shut to all but a trickle of tankers and ships. That's the world's most important artery, as we well know now, a fifth of oil, a fifth of gas, transiting that tiny 22 miles between Iran and Oman. But at the same time, you have this other development, separate development, of the mutual targeting of energy infrastructure across the Gulf, in Iran, but also in the GCC nations. Almost all of them hit in return. And the combination of the two, you would expect to see the oil price go up. And perhaps the bigger surprise is it didn't go up quite so much last week. We had sort of suspended animation in the oil markets. It didn't so much have in the gas markets, which did go up very sharply, particularly because of Qatar. But I think what we're having now is a delayed reaction to the sort of changing geography of this conflict, but also the fact that there was a de-escalation path kind of available briefly, but that has been sort of put back away now. And so it does look like something that will go on for weeks, possibly months. And that is why you get what I have to say was truly astonishing market reactions in the oil markets just literally in the last 40 minutes. As I say, it settled a bit, but still about $105, $106 per barrel. Smashed the $100 sort of psychological barrier, if you like, this morning in early trade.
So, Faisal, you were talking about a kind of delayed reaction. Could we see even higher, steeper prices as the world, the economy kind of deals with all of these variables?
Well, it's a great question, and the honest answer is nobody knows. Because, as your previous guests pointed to, nobody knows about the underlying geopolitics, the underlying conflict dynamics. Obviously, everything is built on this. You know, what are the sorts of imponderables here? Are we going to see the US Navy escort tankers through the Straits of Hormuz. Naval experts will tell you that is pretty risky and would be an astonishing development. They need total naval superiority for something like that to happen. Is that going to happen? If it does happen, that might temper things. But how stable would that situation be? We're already seeing the market react in other interesting ways. The gas market, for example, tankers are turning round in the Atlantic that were heading from the US full of fracked LNG, filling up Europe's tankers essentially. They're turning round now and heading to Asia because Asia needs that gas, anticipating a shut-in of their gas supplies in the Gulf. In terms of who this will affect the most, it will be the Asian markets where there may be a physical problem if those tankers don't get moving quickly. But some of the best forecasters around are saying, well, when you have uncertainty built on uncertainty, what is the right price for this commodity? We're told by the IEA, the International Energy Agency, that the oil markets are quite well stocked. So, there shouldn't be an immediate physical problem. But, when you have this level of geopolitical sensitivity, one example, I think it was Goldman Sachs that said on Friday, if this lasts for the rest of March, you could be testing record prices above $150 a barrel that was seen on a couple of occasions over the past decade or so.
Thanks to Faisal for that update. Well, attacks have been reported across the Gulf as this war enters its second week. Iran has continued to launch attacks on a number of Arab neighbours, particularly those hosting US military bases and infrastructure, all in retaliation against the US and Israeli raids and attacks in Iran. Saudi Arabia says 2 people were killed and 12 others were injured after a military projectile fell on a residential location southeast of the capital, Riyadh. The King of Bahrain has given a rare speech condemning Iran over unprecedented and unjustifiable attacks on his country and its allies. And Kuwait was targeted with new strikes. One drone hit fuel tanks at the country's international airport. Another hit a government tower in the capital, Kuwait City. Well, let me quickly show you live pictures coming in from Lebanon. This is in the capital, Beirut. There have been strikes from Israel on various targets in the city across the last week, including on Saturday. The Israelis issued an evacuation order affecting around 500,000 people in the southern suburbs of Beirut. Airstrikes were also conducted, as I was mentioning, in those southern suburbs as Israel continues to target the Iran-backed Hezbollah group. The Israeli military says it's carried out what it called a precision strike in Beirut early on Sunday, targeting, it says, commanders from Iran's Revolutionary Guards, who Israel says were operating in Lebanon. It didn't give a specific location. The Lebanese government says almost 500,000 people have registered as displaced since the fighting began, and it says more than 400 people have been killed, including 83 children. Let's hear more from our correspondent in Beirut, Wira Davis.
We've heard from the IDF, the Israeli military, tonight that 2 of its soldiers were killed in action fighting against Hezbollah in southern Lebanon. That's after, of course, Israeli troops have reinvaded southern Lebanon in a bid to defeat and disarm Hezbollah in that part of the country and to stop them firing rockets into northern Israel. Of course, there was a year-long war between Israel and Hezbollah, which only ended last year. And during that conflict, Israel was thought to have destroyed much of Hezbollah's military and personnel capability. But it's pretty clear that Hezbollah has managed to retain men and weapons. And those Israeli troops now in southern Lebanon, although Israel says it has killed at least 200 members of Hezbollah and attacked 600 targets, there is still quite a serious and significant Israeli military operation happening in the south of the country.
Well, from Wira Davis in Lebanon, we turn back to the situation in Iran, where oil depots were hit overnight by an intense US and Israeli bombardment. Locals have been reporting multiple explosions and a sky blackened with thick smoke. My colleagues at BBC Persian have been receiving messages from people inside Iran, and we've voiced some of their words.
Karaj was calm for a day, but now it has turned wild again. They have blown it up. Oil depot, Hisar and Baghestan areas. It was as if the night has suddenly turned into day.
The city is really covered in smoke. You can smell the burning. I can't see the sun. There is a horrible smoke. It's still there. I'm very tired. I've been indoors the whole time.
Well, let's turn back to the story that we're covering here, with Iran confirming that its new supreme leader will be Mojtaba Khamenei. He was born on the 8th of September 1969 in the northeastern city of Mashhad. He's the second of the late Ayatollah Ali Khamenei's 6 children. He received his secondary education at the religious Alavi school in Tehran. At the age of 17, he served in the military for short periods during the Iran-Iraq War. That's according to Iranian media. In 1999, he went to Qom, a holy city which is considered an important centre of Shia theology, to continue his religious studies. He's never held any government office, nor has he given public speeches or interviews. US diplomatic cables, which were published by WikiLeaks in the late 2000s, described him as the power behind the robes, who is widely regarded as a capable and forceful leader within the regime. Well, we'll continue to bring you details and reaction to this confirmation of the new Supreme Leader of Iran. Do remember you can follow developments through the live page, which is running on the BBC website, bbc.com/news, or if you have a smartphone, you can download the BBC News app onto your smartphone too. I'm going to be back with you in a few minutes as we continue our ongoing coverage.